Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PowettPlay Podcast. As always, it's me, John, and Shannon, and Kieran Powell. How are you, Kai?
Not too bad, Jordan. How are you?
Yeah, good. Quick turnaround after discussing the team of the week, but I wanted to sort of touch base and get your opinion really with the the announcement of Harry Brook being named the white ball captain from England. And then with that, off the back of, Shai, we had the conversation last week, really, in terms of, from a leadership perspective, what do you make of the England announcement, really?
Well, I think we had forecasted this from last summer, even before Harry Brook captained England in that one-day series, that Harry Brook would probably be the next England 50-over captain. I didn't think that he'd have been the T20 captain, but I guess it's a thing around the world now where they try and align limited overs captaincy under or consolidated under one person, as West Indies have done the same with Shai. But I think what is actually happening is that there's been sort of a lack of planning, or I guess a lack of foresight from both boards, if you look at it properly, because I don't think that, for example, from a Harry Brook's point of view, he's someone that would have been groomed for captaincy. Shai Hope as well. I'm not sure if he is someone that was groomed for captaincy from a young age, but I think that this is the problem that we're having from, I guess, a global standpoint, where teams are getting caught out not knowing who the next option or options for leadership are. In the case of the West Indies, for example, with the test team situation, as we spoke about last week, Alzari Joseph was, I guess, sort of thrusted into that position, and I told you like how I sort of thought about that and how that sort of came to fruition. You look at Joshua De Silva, who is someone who they were saying that was going to be earmarked or groomed for captaincy over an extended period of time, but then was dropped from the team, and then now we're left in a situation where there's no obvious or right choice. Like, it doesn't matter who you select next, there's no right choice. And I think England sort of ended up being in the same position as well, where it was just a matter of, well, Harry Brook is a talented young player, obviously someone that's done very well in the test arena, but someone that's still finding his footing in the ODI and T20 formats, but they've just gone with him. And I think pretty much most people knew that would happen as well, given that he stepped out of the IPL and didn't decide to fulfill his contract there. I think it was widely expected that this was the reason why. But I think what these boards need to do is sit down and have, I guess, a heart-to-heart meeting with their respective bodies, whether that is the counties in England and the regional teams in the Caribbean, and identify the next set of leaders, because I think captaincy is something that has to be practiced. You have to gain that experience over a long period of time. So if, for example, I know that my current captain is, using Shai Hope, for example, 31, 32 years old, then preferably I'd like my regional teams to identify the next captain being someone that's probably 25, 26 years old, or maybe even younger if it's someone that's already established in the team. You're looking at a Guyana, for example, someone like a Kevlon Anderson for me. And you start grooming these guys as captains from now, so that they can gain that knowledge, that experience across formats, across different conditions, so that when in 4 or 5 years' time your captain steps down, or he's dropped, or he's moved on, then you have a natural line of succession and you have options across the board, because you'd expect those people to be seeded into the international stage by then as well, and have obtained enough playing experience on the international stage, as well as leadership experience on the domestic stage. And it may be even a situation where they would have been brought onto a leadership team within the international stage, maybe being a vice captain or being a part of a decision-making team within the team, so just different things like that, because I think that's where teams are getting caught out now, as opposed to before. Growing up, you would have heard that at the age of 17, Michael Clark knew he was going to be
Yeah.
the next Australian captain after Ricky Ponting and all these things. People planned and there was succession planning.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to happen anymore. I mean, you can even start from the under 15 levels, and you identify your captains across those stages and how they progress and mature to the under 17s, the 19, your leaders.
Your leaders, yeah.
Exactly. It's just like for example, a political party knows their next set of leaders after the current leader.
Yeah.
A business knows its next leader after the CEO steps down.
Yeah.
All these different things. So I just think that for cricket to be the second largest sport in the world, and for this to happen to England, that's one of the most funded teams in the world, for this to happen to the West Indies. And you look at the West Indies history, actually, I was just thinking about it. I'm casting my mind back to, for example, when Chris Gayle became the West Indies captain.
Yeah.
Amner Sawan was the vice captain under Brian Lara for the longest time. And he was, at that point, more advanced as a player and more established, more of a senior player in the team and in the region than Chris Gayle was. But obviously something was identified in Chris Gayle. But then why was he not developed as a captain throughout regional cricket more? Why wasn't he given more opportunities to be vice captain of the West Indies team so he can gain experience on an international stage?
Yeah.
You look at, after Chris Gayle was removed, I think it went to Darren Sammy. Again, there was no succession plan of Darren Sammy becoming captain. And I think that in the Caribbean in particular, it's a lot of control or wanting to be in control from the board. So you look at strong personalities. I don't think that if you have a very strong personality, that you'll be given the captaincy of the West Indies team, because they don't feel as though that you can be controlled or you can be puppeted. So you look at, for example, when Darren Sammy eventually became senior enough and spoke out against the board at that T20 World Cup, and he lost his place. A Dwayne Bravo that walked off of a tour in India, lost his place and didn't play for the West Indies again for the longest time. So it needs to be a situation where people take a step back and stop making emotional decisions. Your emotions, your personal feelings don't count towards what the best practices or best options are for a business or a sporting team. And I think that's where it's going wrong at the moment, especially in the Caribbean. As I said, I'm specifically singling out the Caribbean now, where you've got guys that have been in regional boards, on the West Indies boards for 10, 20, 30 plus years.
Yeah.
That should never happen. You need a continual progression of ideas, of people. You can't just have the same people leading organizations, having the same ideas, not being open to critique, not being open to new information, because then you're going to be stuck in a time warp of people thinking the way of the 1990s, the 1980s, and operating in 2025. So you definitely can't have success with anything like that. So I think that is a huge faux pas, and that needs to be addressed definitely in the UK, which I think it will be. I don't think they'll be caught out again like this. But in the Caribbean, for sure, if you look at regional teams, you need to have a situation where even if there is all 8 regional teams with captains 30 plus, the vice captains need to be younger people that can be seeded into that leadership role and potentially into a West Indies team, or they are already in and around a West Indies team that can actually have a benefit for West Indies cricket going forward.
I think for me as well, speaking from an England fan perspective now, is I agree with it seemed like it was always going to be the case that Harry Brook was going to be captain. But as a white ball captain, how does he get better with his leadership skills? Because I personally think that him playing in the IPL or these franchise tournaments, you learn, you develop, you're sharing changing rooms with people who've played hundreds of international games. the coaches that are part of the IPL are genuine greats of the game, and you're going to be sharing ideas and learning loads. And you look at England's success period, or the peak successful period in the white ball was under Jos Buttler. Jos Buttler had played years of franchise cricket all around the world, and he implemented those plans and he brought them in. Now, obviously, I appreciate towards the end of his time as captain, it didn't quite work for whatever reason and stuff. But when England were playing the best cricket with him was when he was playing white ball 360 all the time, and it was a big benefit. And with the lack of white ball that's played in England, and Harry Brook being a key player in the test team, I don't know how he gets better at his leadership skills when he doesn't play it that much.
No, I fully agree with you. The only point that I guess I'd query there is I'd probably say England's white ball was at its best under Owen Morgan, and I think. Yeah, Butler inherited that, but I fully agree with you in terms of how does he get access to information if he's going to be leader of the limited oversight, but his strong point at this point is test cricket. Yeah. And he's just playing as a player in a test team. Yeah. And that's where I think, I guess, past players, past leaders, but not only in cricket, like you could go into the business world, you could go into other sports and continue to tap into successful people across the leadership realm that could, I guess, provide information. Because leadership at the end of the day is understanding what you have and maximizing it to the best of its ability. Maybe you can even overachieve in some cases, which I think is what people probably think of when they think of New Zealand cricket, for example. But New Zealand have been so consistent at producing players and achieving beyond expectation for the past 10, 15 years that it can't just be by luck anymore. It has to be a very strong system that they have in place. And so if across the board they can tap into successful leaders from various walks of life, because, as I said, ultimately it's just understanding your players, what makes them tick, what they have going on in their personal lives, so you can understand the look on one of your players' faces today without him having even to tell you something, and understand, okay, this is what he needs on this particular day. Then that will go a long way, because, I mean, cricket is obviously you're managing 10 other players, and then you've still got to look after your game as a captain, whether you're a batter or a bowler. So it becomes very tricky in that way, because ultimately you're all only on the field together whilst bowling, but then you've still got to be able to look at a batter that's not going through the greatest of runs and give him that reassurance, or let him know that, look, you're still going to play whatever the case is. I think that X, Y, and Z, or you can see that someone's having a personal issue. Maybe it's like the loss of a family member or something that's happened that has obviously taken their mind away from cricket for a bit, and being able to comfort them and cushion them and make them feel welcomed and loved even more during that period of time within the environment you're trying to create. Yeah,
definitely. And that's when you talk about like strategy and long-term planning, because ultimately, at the end of the day, great players don't make great leaders necessarily. Some do, some don't. And that might be because of how they are as a person, in terms of they might have to go about being quite selfish as a player to get the best out of them. And then that might not allow them to, ultimately spend time and get the best out of the other group of 10, the other 10 players within that team. And if you don't start to give people opportunities from leadership perspective, you don't know until you throw them in the deep end. And at that point, it possibly could be too late and obviously have a negative impact on the side. And I think that's where, again, like I mentioned, my main point, I appreciate obviously the crossover between Owen Morgan and Jos Buttler, but ultimately within the situation with Harry Brook ultimately I do think he's going to take over as a test captain from Stokes. This is a bit of pre-planning potential on that side, but I just want to see how he develops as a captain, and with the limited situations to play domestic cricket as well as up from a franchise side of things, other than actually representing England in T20 and 50 over. How does he develop that leadership skills?
Question, Jordan, now that I'm thinking about it, if obviously Harry Brook being 25, 26.
Yeah.
Could you possibly highlight or identify another 2 to 3 people that you'd like to see in and around the England leadership group, whether they're in the England team at the moment or playing county cricket, that you think for future planning would be people that have leadership credentials or qualities?
I think that's where I'd love to see somebody like an Andrew Flintoff involved more, and not from a playing perspective, because from a leadership things, he had a, from an outside perspective, I always felt as though he had that motive, he had that leadership within. I appreciate it probably didn't work for him at times being a captain, because obviously when he took over as captain, it didn't quite work. But I think he's matured more as a person now from a leadership side of things. And I think if you were to go and do it again, but in terms of playing, no. And I think that's probably an issue as well, is that I can't highlight that. And I know that that's things that we have spoke about before on this podcast, but there isn't standout candidates who I think that are jumping at that opportunity. And ultimately, that's probably why they have gone with Harry Brook as well, because there isn't standout people who can go and do that job.
Because from a West Indies standpoint, I'd think, and I always bring this up, I'd like to see them form, I guess, a leadership panel or leadership group. You look at the likes of Clive Lloyd, the Viv Richards. Obviously, Darren Sammy has been successful as a T20 captain, and he's currently the coach. I think from a regionals perspective, if you look at someone like a Leon Johnson that we had onto the podcast some time ago, and the success that he's had as the captain regionally, and what Guyana has continued to do.
I was just going to say that. Exactly.
Based on the ecosystem and the infrastructure that they've built up there, I think that's something that's worth studying. And then you highlight a few young players that you think these are our potential next in line West Indies players. And so we'd like to start developing them as leaders as well. Obviously, I'm going to say Kevlin Anderson. I'm going to say Joel Andrew, because I think those are 2 guys that will definitely play for the West Indies. I'm not sure what Kevin Wickham is like as a guy within the dressing room, but he's someone that I think has huge potential as well. And I'm definitely going to throw Jaden Sears in there as well, because I think that for such a young guy to have done what he's doing at this age, and he's pretty much a shoe-in, at least in the test version, I think that added responsibility will only bring more out of him. So I think those are 4 guys that I can identify straight away as potential future leaders from a Caribbean standpoint, along with, as I said, those mentors. And then you can even go into the business field, or you can go into speaking to people in other sports like a Usain Bolt and how he managed to get the best out of himself to become world record breaker several times and win so many gold medals. And then you can start building strong leadership across the Caribbean.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's where, I mentioned him before, you obviously felt a little bit on the spot. It's like players like Tom Banton coming through for England as well. I know obviously started the county championship with a 300, but again at 26, these are people you should be looking at pinpointing now. And if that communication goes to Somerset and you speak about, ways of helping development, again, for me, it goes back to this communication that we keep speaking about. Is it the ECB or West Indies Cricket Board have to feed into these teams and speak about that? And even if it's out of season where, you might put 3 or 4 from each team onto a leadership seminars, you talk about this is what happens in the business environment. Businesses pick people out and go, do you know what, we want you to go and carry out this qualification in leadership, or we want you to look at this. It's all about that career development, whether it be professionally for the sports side of things or business, from a business perspective. And I think that sometimes that's where the counties should be driving that into the ECB as well, from an English perspective. And obviously then you talk about the regional from your side of things.
Yep, 100%, totally agree. And that's what happens in the business world. So, I mean, ultimately, cricket is a sport, but it is a business as well. And so you need to have these sort of plans in place as well. Yeah,
exactly. And, you look at, obviously, the likes of Rocky Flintoff and Archie Vaughan are getting a lot of press over here at the minute because of, who the fathers are and stuff like that. And I think that they're in a situation as well where, the sort of spotlights on them more. But you kind of need I'd like to see a bit more planning with this group of under-19s and the younger group of players. And that's when you mentioned about Michael Clark. Now, Michael Clark might be a very unique example, because when you're earmarking someone at 17, it's a big statement. But also, at the end of the day, that's because of obviously he had those leadership skills within him. And ultimately, with across the board, I kind of want to see that as well. Like, sorry, I feel like I'm going on myself a little bit with it, but you pick these leaders out.
100% agree with you. Like this is something that has to be identified from an early age, because ultimately a few of them will fall through the cracks, and if you end up with 2-3 options, then at least from a group of 6, 7, 8, you've got like a core group to work with, and these guys will obtain experience, skills, know-how, all of that over a period of time, so that whenever the situation comes, you'll just be choosing the best person for the stage of that particular team at that point in time.
Yeah, exactly. And then with that in mind, you then look into down the line about schedules and not allowing them as such, but then making sure that they do go and play in, if there's an opportunity to go and play in the Big Bash, or if there's an opportunity to go and play in the IPL or the PSL or wherever it may be, because that experience that you gain is invaluable to them at that moment in time. It allows them to come back over here in the summer and implement various bits of skills and leadership, but also tactics as well. So yeah, I know. Do you know what? It's been really good to speak to you about things like this, because it's really informative to get it from your perspective, from an involvement, but an involvement side of things, and things that you've seen as well over the years. Because you mentioned there about the situation with Chris Gale taking over from Brian Lara and obviously Sarwan and stuff. So it's good to get that insight and speaking so openly about it.
No, definitely. I mean, obviously, it's something that's been in the news recently for both for England and the West Indies, and I think that it's something that we needed to do a deeper dive into, following on from obviously the announcements of both new captains.
No, good. Excellent. All right. Well, thanks very much, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Speak to you all soon.